Well, actually, probably when in a minute, I'm going to post some of the ethical dilemmas that have been facing folks like you. And some of them are yours. You'll recognize some. And so just a kind of a disclaimer, when I taught ethics at DePaul, the first time I approached this process, they said, oh, you're going to teach ethics for public policy or for people who are in nonprofit organizations. They said, all right. So of course I went and I looked at Aristotle and John Stuart Mill and all the great ones. And so I used that, and it was a good class and they liked it. And the next year they said, you're going to, it was on my teaching list again. And I couldn't remember anything. And so I couldn't remember what all these ethical persons and these philosophers said. And I thought, well, if I don't remember it, nobody else is going to. So this is a crazy way to approach it. So I used to teach this class by using literature because there are many ethical dilemmas that you can pose in literature. But the disclaimer is really this. People often think that that ethics is like a decision tree. For some people it is, here's the dilemma, yes, no, if yes, then on. That it's not like that. And so there's no right answer, but there is the best answer for the persons who are in the middle of the situation. And when I think about ethical dilemmas, there's a great quote that Teddy Roosevelt used about, he called it the man in the middle. If you've never read that, or the man in the arena, if you've never read that, I'll send it to you. But he basically says, good luck and thanks to you all who are on the outside, but let's give credit, and who, kind of lob things at you and tell you, they never thought of and how ignorant they were and they could have and why didn't they. And he says, wait till you're the person in the arena, and each of you might be. So I really honor each of you because I've been in situations on boards myself. So this is almost in some ways too much of a Rorschach test because it comes from my own experience. So there's really, the title of this is going to be, and I'm going to try and share the screen, right? I practiced this before we did it. Where did it go? There you go, down there. Hang on. Slideshow. Come on. From the beginning. How about that? Can you see it okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Along the way, let's just have a chat. There's few enough of us to do that. So if you want to interject or say, yeah, that was my ethical dilemma, you'll recognize it, but you don't have to. So there's two dimensions, I think, to ethical decision making. And one is the habits of the mind. What can you do systematically or logically, or from my mind, a policy perspective, to think about dilemmas generally? And they don't have to be ethical. They can be a decision about how you change the schedule because you've got an assembly. There's always persons to check out and things to think about. And then it's the habit of the mind, so that you bring the right habit to ethical decision making. Because I think sometimes people think ethical decisions come like this, and they do in Chicago, but not otherwise. So let me explain this one. Oh, you're sitting in your office and some person comes in and she says, that library would look really great at Our Lady of Mercy at Farmington Hills. I could do a lot with that library, but my husband works with such and such contractors, and maybe he'd be a good person to have you contract with to do that renovation. And then you sit there on your desk and you think and you say, oh, maybe that would be difficult, and you say, I'll come back to you, and you have time to make those decisions. And then there's the other kind of ethical decision that I find, which is more of a pain in the neck. And this pain in the neck comes when you're standing and they'll say, this actually happened to me, and I can share it because it was a public experience, but it happened to me when I was at St. Xavier University in Chicago, and somebody who was a friend of mine said, Sue, I need to talk to you. There's something you should know. you know, did you know that? And I stopped her right away and I said, look, are you telling me because you're kvetching? You know, you just want a crab? Are you telling me because you're doing somebody else's dirty work and they should be telling me, but they got you to do it? Or are you telling me because I'm a vice president and I need to do something? And it was the latter of that. And it had to do with some fraud that went on at St. Xavier University. It ultimately resulted in three things really. The vice president for finance went to prison for 32 months, federal penitentiary. She stole $1 million from the university. But the worst thing is she accrued $25 million in debt that the board never saw, and that university's budget couldn't handle that. And
Wow.
so, but this person came to me and she said, Sue, there's something you need to see. And she had not bank statements, credit card statements. And you'll have to laugh at this, and I hope it doesn't happen to you. They were always for $9,999.99. $9,999. And why? Because $10,000 required 2 signatures and she could do it by herself with 1. So these are the kind of things, and you sit there and you say, I just went for a cup of coffee, you know, and then somebody comes in. So does that sound like anything that ever happened in your lives? You know, that's the kind of thing to watch out for. So, ethical stories from Catholic high schools. Okay, some of this you'll recognize, huh? A male high school teacher these are all true, fired after revealing marriage to male, and they were let go. There was no benefits. There was no anything. An unmarried female was fired for being pregnant. That happened in a place that I was familiar with once. A 41-year-old high school teacher was fired after, hi Carrie, was fired after using the N-word repeatedly in class to discuss why some sports teams' names are derogatory to Native people. Married Catholic faculty divorces and remarries outside the church. Oops. Female faculty journalism advisor was fired after a student magazine published a female student's pro-choice essay. A former social worker at an Indianapolis Catholic high school says she was fired for making public statements in support of LGBTQ colleagues who were terminated. Okay, a lot of folks think that ethics have a notion of ethics, but let me say, here's what they generally are, just kind of a general framework for ethics. It's a matter of right and wrong, but sometimes your right is somebody else's wrong. It's not clear cut, but that's usually what it is. We're not talking about what your logo looks like or whether you should reverse the school colors. We're talking about something more serious. And there's usually some sense of urgency, like this just happens and you think you have to respond right away. And probably one of the first things that you need to do is see if you can increase the time so you don't have to respond. That's a good tool for crisis management. Is sometimes out of my own anxiety, I respond, and the better thing right away, and the better thing is to just take a step back and don't. The choice is not clear. There are competing interests, there are competing goods, and there is a responsibility to act or not to act. And morality and integrity are at the heart of the choice. So that's kind of like the day that, this is not the fun day that you go to work, or the fun day where you have a board meeting, or when you get a chair from the head of school, or when the chair of the board calls you. So these are ethical dilemmas. What are they in general? Now, if you go back to the top, a matter of right and wrong, is the behavior consistent with church teaching? That might be one of the questions that circles in your mind. Some sense of urgency, seems like a crisis. The media may be after you, the parents, everybody's needing immediate attention. And that's one of the things just in decision-making. If you can kind of slow the process down a little bit, you can do a little better. The choice is not clear. In this case, of those ones, employees were all well qualified and good at their jobs, every single one of them. but all were seen as being in violation of church teaching, or maybe they breached the morality clause of their contract. So the question is, and look at the nature of the world. A lot of the things have to do with gender identity or sexual orientation or sex generally. You know how we are in the Catholic Church. The hierarchy focuses on these things, but there's also other dilemmas that, like the one I just told you, it has to do with finance. And when you act, either course is an action. You can either choose to act or not to act. Not to act is a choice. It's in your mind. You can choose not to act. And then what's your personal integrity, and that who do you carry around with you? So that's the nature of ethical dilemmas. Now, just as the alerts, and you probably could name some more, I'll ask you actually in a minute, but purchasing and contracts, that's an area where somebody can walk in and it'll cause you think you're just having a conversation with somebody about something you need at the school. And the fact is that you're going to get yourself into a purchasing or contractual thing with a vendor. Hiring decisions. Most people think of the third one, firing decisions, where that goes. And in some of the cases, well, I guess in all of the cases that I just mentioned, somebody got fired, but hiring is also, and that is an ethically touchy territory sometimes. Who do you want? Why do you want the person you want? Is it best for the school? And what does best for the school means? Promoting somebody in a position can also, you can say that's a political thing and say it looks political, but really deep in the heart, it has to do with integrity and ethics. And then the one that I talked about at St. Xavier, I think you should know. My best advice, if nothing else in this, is to say when somebody says that to you, stop them. Because this just happened to me 3 weeks ago again. I think you should know. And I said, wait, are you telling me because I need to know, because you want me to intervene where I shouldn't, or are you just kind of mouthing off? Okay, so that's the areas to be careful with. Can you add any other ones beside these where in your own, without giving away the confidential goods of your school? And I can't see everybody, so just chime in. I can only see part of you, so. Does that sound?
Sister Sue, can I ask a question? So I think you should know. So I understand, what you're saying. It's like, well, really, why? Are you is this just like a gossipy thing? You're just complaining, or is there really something serious going on here? Does there come a time when you say, well, don't tell me? I mean, I guess.
Yes. And it happened to me, and I'll tell you, yes, it did. And this might happen more to middle managers than it happens to people who are in the ultimate decision making. Mm-hmm. I had somebody once who said to me, she had a problem that she was discussing organizationally, and I said, "Is this?" And I could see where this was going. I could just feel it, and I said, "Wait a minute. I may not be the right person to act on this." Now, why did I say that? Because I could have gotten myself in the doghouse, because it was, to my mind, she needed to go to a different person. Mm-hmm. So I said, if you could just, I might have to say, stop, let's see where we're going. And she went on, and finally I said, no, this is really, it was an employment related issue. Okay. I said, it would be best for you not to continue to talk to me about this. You need to talk to this person. Mm-hmm. And she did. I said, I can't help you. I'm not in the position not the right person to do this. So I guess maybe another dimension of ethics is sometimes you can direct people to the right person, but I did stop her. Later, after things had changed, I said, do you remember that conversation we had about, and she said, yes. I said, was that what it was about? And she said, yes. So be real careful of employment issues. And I say this to you who are principals and board chairs. Make sure you direct that to the right person before you get involved too deeply. Just from a legal perspective, even. So does that make sense, Mary Ann?
Yes, thank you.
Would you agree?
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sure.
So with that same, exactly on that same thing, does there come a time though that you really need to make sure that the other person listened to the person? You know, because sometimes, you know, they're coming to you
Oh, yeah.
because they're feeling it really, and then you pass them on and nothing ever happens. And are you the block then that to something that you really could help with?
You know, you're absolutely right. It is, as I think about that in the case that I described at St. Xavier, the person who told me was a friend of mine. She was in accounts payable. So she used to see what got paid out. And my ethical dilemma at that time was I should have gone to the president about it, right? Of the university. She was 3 weeks away from leaving the university and she was known for not showing up. So if I went to her, and we had already had a sense that something was wrong, but every time we went to her, she dismissed us, those of us who were different vice presidents. You know, that you go, you know, she's not doing this. This isn't my responsibility. So where do they have to go? I had to go to a board person. And that was a really tough decision because I had just been passed over for the presidency of the university. So I was in the position of looking like sour grapes. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, and it wasn't sour grapes. I didn't get the job, but even to go to the president, to the chair of the board was tough because he was the one who made the decision to hire somebody else. And that was the board chair and the board's decision. But you see what looked like sour grapes. So I had to go to somebody else who wouldn't dismiss me right off the bat. So it was a different trustee. So you're absolutely right. And I got back to the other person and I said, here's what we're doing. But yes, if I had taken it to the president of the university with 3 weeks to go before she left, and she'd already left actually. So there was a lot of complications with that. I went over her head. And that was a tough decision. I knew I went over her head, but and I told her, I said, you were out of here. You weren't going to do anything and you hadn't responded in the past. So why would I think you would? But anyway, there it was. Might have been right, might have been wrong, but it's what I did. So you're right, Regina.
I see that dilemma of, when do you go over somebody's head? Sometimes from faculty,
Yeah.
when they feel that there's either unethical or not following mission. And it's like, well, we've tried to do this. We've tried to do this. How do we get, what's the next step? And I mean, I strongly support it's like, don't go to your board. If you haven't talked to your president, don't go there. You
Right.
can't, don't jump over. But I, have now seen cases where they've tried to do everything possible. And they're not sure of the avenue of what is the next step.
Yeah.
Who's the next person? Because rightly so, they really did need to go to a next step. So I think trying to figure that out without eroding the responsibility of the administration of the school and the board's responsibility, and Mercy Education's responsibility. Like, don't jump straight to us. That's not our role. But I think there are those dilemmas in there because people just, when they see something or feel something so deeply, they're not sure what to do.
You know, you're really very right. And I think of another situation where I was a trustee. I might have been the board chair, but I was the board chair. When faculty, and I had been they knew me. When faculty would come and say, "This is really wrong. I've seen it. She said, you should have seen what she said happened. Listen to it. Listen to the chain. You should see what she said happened in her classroom." I said, "Did you see it?" "No." "Who told you?" "Well, somebody told me." "Well, there you are, right? 3 steps removed. Did you see, well, then she should come and talk to me. Why didn't she talk to the president about it, or the president of the school or the principal? She had, and it was the president or the principal of the school. So somebody said, well, you should, no, you gotta triangulate and see. It's very difficult, but yes, the problem was stopped at one of the higher levels. And so then you had to, but you can't act till somebody actually tells you what happened. I don't think, you can't, as a trustee, you can't go off on somebody said what somebody said. You got to get to somebody who was aggrieved to say it. And you darn well be better sure that there's more than one of you that comes to you. So it gets really hard when you're in a position like of Mesa or the board, because especially if it's a head of school at some school, or some university where I would have these experiences. Okay. Am I talking in your world?
Mhm.
Okay, that's good, because I haven't been in it for a while, but I really did like it. Okay, so habits of the mind. To goals for today, then, to back up a bit, to present a framework about how to think through ethical dilemmas, framework. And then habits of the heart, to propose some suggestions or approaches for cultivating a heart responsive to God's promptings about how you might behave in an ethically challenging situation. So this is thinking and God. It's all about discernment. All of this. A head is involved in discernment. A heart is involved in discernment. And for you who deal with our folks at Mercy Schools, really cultivating a habit of discernment is really important. And that doesn't mean that you do these things and it takes away the tension or the upset or makes everything right, or you feel wonderful about everything you did, but at least you know you had integrity. You can walk away with. So the first part, then, habits of the mind. I'm going to present an overview and then go through them separately. You can have this stuff. So just if you find any of it worth anything. So in the Greenwood days of your board or your high school administration, seek pre-agreement on organization assumptions, values, and your own values. Now, Mercy Education has all sorts of core values. You have them all over your schools. Everywhere I go, I love seeing it. I was down in Jamaica not too long ago. Every place just loaded on at the Alpha School, just loaded with values. It would make you really happy. Here you are in Jamaica. I'm from Chicago, and you see things, and it looks like a Mercy school. Darn it, it's wonderful. But what are your organizational assumptions and values? And that's where a mission statement is really, really critical. What are you doing, and who are you working for, and why are you doing it? Go back to that mission statement. It sounds like I had somebody once, I was working as a consultant for another high school in Chicago. And she said, I could write that in 5 minutes. I said, so could I, and nobody would give a darn. Nobody would care. But work on that. That mission statement is critical, because that's what you're going to go back to in an ethical dilemma. That's what your PR person is going to say. The mission of this school is to do X, Y, Z. And you don't say, by God, we're doing it, but that's what you say in your heart. Ask the right questions around values. And I know at boards, big reports on financing, house fundraising, and what's enrollment doing. And once in a while we talk about curriculum, but let's get those in there. Ask those right questions around values, and then identify all the stakeholders. And I mean, really do it systematically. Don't say, well, you got the parents and the alums, and we've got, you might have the alderman if you're in Chicago. That's a big deal. You might have not the cardinal. You might have the bishop, the vicar. You might not have just the Sisters of Mercy. You might have who are local. You have Mesa. You've got them all. So identify those stakeholders and then take moral counsel. And try and do that even before you're into a situation, but it doesn't mean blabbing all over the whole world. That's for sure. So do your personal board exam. And now those of us who are sisters know it is. It's like you go to bed at night and you sort of say, God, how did I do, today? how is my mission as a sister of mercy? You know, was I more merciful, more hospitable? Did I care for poor people? You know, even if I'm doing the job that I'm doing. Well, there, you know, do it on the board. How's the board doing? How's the board doing its decision? At the end of the meeting, can you really take 15 minutes and say, okay, how did we do today? How did what we do refer to the mission? How did the finance report that we just accepted, how did that address the mission of the school? What is going on? And then you won't have a board meeting that's totally controlled by finance, development and student enrollment, which is usually what I always saw board meetings was the topics at most boards. That was a happy one. So that's a good time. So and then consider the context. What's the culture of your school? What are the people like? What do they demand? Do you have mostly, do you have ethical, I'm not sorry, do you have cultural diversity that you have to attend to so that a statement comes out, but it might need to be in another language? You know, how attentive are you? And then anticipate the consequences. And some people always look at a cost benefit analysis, the economists in us, and oh, let's anticipate the consequences. Well, you can to some degree, but you know, when you think you can anticipate the consequences, go back to your NCAA bracket and see how far you can anticipate.
Mhm.
And then finally, identify the desired outcomes. What are you trying to do here? And that's another mission question. Go back to your mission and your values. Why are you there? Not to please the parents. I would say you are there to educate kids. So if you look at some of those dilemmas we talked about, what are your values? Now I'm making these ones up. You might have others. The good of the students, not the faculty, not the staff, not even the Sisters of Mercy, the good of the students. A Catholic mission to educate the whole person intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally. These sound so trite until you get in the middle of an ethical problem. Learning Catholic social teaching. Oh yeah, we're all about Catholic social teaching. Subsidiarity, you know, isn't that, what does that really mean? Are we trying to teach our students to live virtuous lives? That assumes there's virtuous lives across cultures, across that we can hang on to. Are we trying to help our students see themselves and others as made in God's image and loved by God? And then tie it to the mission. Whoops, sorry. And let me just go back, and I can't do that on this because I'm not good enough. But let me just say what just got pushed over. It's not the faculty, parents, or trustees, and it's not even the church hierarchy in all cases. Those are not, you know, our value is to do what the Sisters of Mercy want. Well, yes, it is, but is that your mission? Justice for faculty and staff is conditioned on what's best for the students. What's the mission? The mission does not exist for the faculty. Schools exist for the students. I mean, these are just some questions you could have. Now, you might have a different answer. I do believe universities think that they exist for the faculty. And actually, there is a history to that. The faculty used to teach people, and then they got administrators because they didn't want to be burdened with teaching. Not the same in high school. So ask the right questions around values. What's the choice before me? Try to be as precise as possible. Do I really have the freedom to make a choice? And is it my choice to make? So what's the choice before me? It's not helpful necessarily. Is the church's official teaching correct regarding the morally illicit nature of gay marriage? That's not the issue before you. Is the church's teaching correct? So you can have a discussion, you know, you're in that nasty thing. You've got somebody who, you know, doesn't fit the church's norm, and then we're saying it's scandalous and all this. It's not helpful to debate whether the church's teaching is correct or not. You know, that's not going to help your situation. Might be better to think about, if the good of the students, then what is the best thing to do here for the good of the students? If that's what your mission is. What happens to students if this faculty member is terminated? Do you see, the first two questions are about your mission and who you serve. You know, you're not serving the hierarchy, and you're not serving the staff, and you're not serving the faculty. But then, does it necessarily follow that a teacher should be terminated for violating church teaching? The example of a faculty member who's divorced and remarried, that's a violation too, as much as some others. But, and I would suspect I was a colleague of many people who were in second marriages, but that doesn't get everybody all, you know, hot to trot. That's the notion of context. Does the violation of a contract disqualify the teaching from educating students in a Catholic context? In other words, have you had other situations where somebody violated their contract and you kept them? See, and I know you can think, I know some of these things are going sadly through your minds about how these things came up, and I'm not making any judgments, but do you see, you can have these different kinds of questions. So that's why I think you probably can teach these better than me. So who's your key stakeholders? Who needs to be consulted? Who needs to be informed? Those are two different questions. Who needs to be consulted and who needs to be informed? And what's the communications plan from beginning to end? You got to think about that all along the way. Sometimes we're so focused on what to say, we don't think about who we're saying it to and at what stages. You know, you come out with the part that comes to that you're going to say to the faculty or to the press or something, but you don't kind of cultivate them along the way. Now, sometimes you can't, of course, because you got confidentiality issues up the wazoo. So there you are. So take moral counsel, get diverse opinions, but not people, of course, who are going to tell the entire world about what your problem is. They're close in, but diverse. You know, they may not be the ones, they're close in and confidential. And you all know, I mean, golly, if boards are so incredibly leaky, but it's so important not to be leaky. That's an integrity question. I know when we would get new people on boards, whether for universities or for high schools or for hospitals, we never had a strong conversation anytime with any new member about confidentiality that I noticed until, you know, you say, oh, we have to be confidential, or this meeting is confidential. But, you know, there's a joke in Rome. Confidential means you only tell one person at a time. You know, you don't worry about that. That's what that actually came from Pope Francis. He said confidential in Rome means you only tell one bishop at a time. You know, you've got the board executive committee, and they have a special responsibility, not the entire board necessarily. You got the board itself, you have the Mesa board, you have others. You do have an organizational context that's important. I think Lisa adverted to that. Here's my last one. Lawyers may need to be consulted, but their counsel should not be sought first or necessarily be determinative in decision-making. Do not think that an ethical decision is what a lawyer will tell you to do. A lawyer helps you clean up a mess after you have one, but that does not absolve you from all this other kind of thing. And I'll tell you a little story I heard. There was then a sister was, a friend of mine was involved at the Chancery office. And this was when the sexual abuses cases came up in the first batch came up in the 1990s. And the lawyer said, you should not apologize or make any statement on behalf of the diocese that you apologize to people who have been abused by priests. You should not say anything whatsoever. You will open up yourself to incredible legal exposure, et cetera, et cetera. And the cardinal according to this sister, said he was tired of listening to that. It was wrong and he was going to apologize. And he didn't give a darn. He didn't use that word, according to the sister. What the lawyers said, the right thing to do was to address the question with the people in a pastoral dimension. So I love lawyers. I wanted to be one at one time. I'm not. I'm a policy analyst and I have some experience in law because I wanted to work on the things on the before they get messed up, rather than calling the lawyers in at the end. But the lawyers may be consulted, but their counsel is not necessarily determinative. Okay, so you don't get off because the lawyer said don't talk about it. You still have to think about it. So
Sue,
then,
could I stop you there for a second?
sure.
I think this is a really critical point that you're making for our schools. We are in such a litigious society that many of our administrators, and I understand why, the very first thing that they do is they go to the lawyer to talk about what should I do here. And that is information that they really should glean. I totally agree with that. But I think that becomes a block for what we consider mission. And it's, I'm really happy that you're going on to the next piece, which is going to talk about heart, because I know that's going to come into that. But I can't emphasize enough how I think you are on exactly the most critical piece of ethical decision making that we are experiencing within our schools at this particular moment in time. So I appreciate it. And I ask you to try and embellish it as much as you can as you talk about this. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. It's probably something that a lot of you might disagree with and what I just said. And if you do, please say so. And again, I can't see the whole lot of you because of the way the screen is, but.
I want to just add to that of, I was working with one board who I would say with the administration and the board, the lawyer was always the first call, always, no matter what it was. And sitting around the board table, one of the gentlemen said, our mistake was we called the lawyers first. He himself was, there were like 3 lawyers at the table and they all shook their heads like that was should not have been our starting point. So I think even for that acknowledgement from that board to say, we missed, that I think the attorneys were saying, really, we missed the mission. We missed starting where we should have.
Sister Lisa, if I can just interject too, and thanks, Sister Regina, because I was going to jump in with the same. I do think this is so critical. And for the board, that Sister Lisa was talking about, they really discerned, right? And they stopped and said, this was we should not have done this first. But I just encourage, because we do have a lot of heads of school on here who work directly with the board, that, this is an exercise that you don't want to think about in crisis, right? Because you will have at times a board that is very, what do the lawyers say? What do the lawyers say? And I know, as Sister Regina said, you're going to get to the heart of that piece of it. But I think it's very hard when you're the head of a school and your board is looking at the legal ramifications and you're trying to bring them around to what is, yes, that is true, and it's there, but really what is the most pastoral way? What is the best decision to make for the interest of the students? So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, the board, you can, if your goal is to reduce your legal exposure, if your goal is to avoid a lawsuit, if your goal is to reduce whatever kind of damages somebody may have, if your goal is to say to the Archbishop about a Catholic identity question, my lawyer told us to do this, that's the wrong way to approach it. And that's why you really have to do these things in the Greenwood. So thank you for that. But, to have another couple conversations here about this, it'd be great to have some coffee with you and sit around and see your experiences. So when you're trying to do this, consider the context, buy some time. Don't reach and call the lawyer as soon as you're there. Don't go first to your public relations person. That's not the first place to go. They have a set of a mindset. They're absolutely have skin in the game, but they are not determinative. Consider your local cultures. Avoid playing tensions out in public, for God's sake. You don't need to do this in public. And consider private conversations with stakeholders. Sometimes it's with the archbishop or the bishop. It's been my experience, just give the person a heads up before it hits the papers. We had a case of a faculty member in San Francisco who was transing from a female to a male during my team at Mercy San Francisco. This is all public, and at that time, the church didn't have any teaching on that. So the president of the community, who's Sister Laura, went and had a conversation with the archbishop, and basically all he could say was, "Thank you for telling me." So now it wasn't, now in other cases, there's more church teaching. So we got off easy on that one. We did. Not that it was hard on the team, but it was different. So, okay, anticipate the consequences.
Okay,
Students.
Sister
Excuse-
Sue,
Yeah,
I-
Marianne.
one of the things I think is really hard, this is so really a great topic, and I so appreciate the conversations we're having and listening to you. In that when people are saying to you, what are we going to do? What are we doing? You should call the lawyer. You should do this. What are we doing? And really to have that self-control and to say, wait, I'm not going to make a decision right now.
Right.
And to really try to, like, so I'm telling myself, that's the first thing, and not to feel pressed. When you're in a leadership role, people are right away like, you're the leader, lead. and it's that, wait, we're not going to make a decision right now, because to do these other things that you're talking about. But I think, oftentimes in these things that feel like a crisis to people, there feels like this immediate need to respond. And that's, really the last thing you want to do.
You're right. And the person who's in your face might be one of the people who you like the most and provides you the best counsel usually, but still back off, back off. Just give yourself some time. So again, here we go back to some of the different people to anticipate the culture, the consequences for. That always sounds easy. It's not. In the interest of time, are the students better off because of what we did? We're all stakeholders treated with respect and dignity, even if not everyone agrees. Can I live with myself as we implement our decisions? And is there correspondence between what we did and the still small voice of God? That's in Kings, 2 Kings. It's just such a beautiful reading. Elijah went to listen for God to just kind of throw down the answer. I need the burning bush, darn it. No, that's a different one. That was Moses. You don't get it. You don't get it in the earthquake. You don't get it in the storm. You get it in the still small voice. Well, this gets to the point, and I'll get there because I know we're coming on our time here. This is just a review. All right. So like cultivating a God responsive heart. Cultivate a quiet, reflective posture and choose silence. How do you do that? Your day is just interruptions are your business, are your kids are. You can't say to the kid who's having a crisis, whether it's the first time they ever flunked a test or whether they're suicidal, oh, wait, I need to go get some quiet time. But on your way home, you can turn the radio off in the car. You really can. And you can say, and make that choice, and that will help. Or sit for 5 or 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a really long time just to sit. It's hard for me, and I've been trying to do it for years, but just take 5 minutes and go sit, get your coffee and sit by yourself with nothing. Because things happen if you do that. You settle yourself and you can hear things. And what you hear is that still small voice of God. Consult the spiritual traditions, texts, and narratives. Yeah, really, the scripture has a lot to say about how you make decisions. Someday I'm going to write that book. I did actually write Moses as a political leader, a paper on that once, but Jesus was not a very good political leader, actually. He was great in getting people to follow him. He was a leader, but he wasn't exactly a good political leader in the sense that he cultivated all the people around him and they all they were all happy. Consult your wisdom figures. And I have, and I hope to God you have. And when I do ethical presentations for nursing students, especially when you're new, be really picky about who you're going to talk to, but find somebody, a coach, a sister, a friend, the best teacher you ever had who's 75 and sitting in the nursing home, but has all her marbles. Find that person because you need them. You need the person who loves you. For me, and Carrie and Katie will know it's Sister Brian Costello, and she's dying right now, but there she is, the person who just loves you, but tells you, don't be an idiot, Sue. You need somebody like that. So choose your friends wisely. So cultivate integrity. How do you do it? Practice discernment. Discernment isn't just for nuns and priests, it's for everybody. Discernment is learning how to figure out what's right. There's no right and wrong answer. There's no cookbook answers to any of the things you're dealing with. There's still small voice prompting. And then say to yourself, would your mother or father or something be proud of you? And I'll tell you, this whole thing used to be called, would your mother be proud of you? But I'll tell you just a short story. And now it could be your mother, your father, somebody's like, So this was at Mercy Hospital in Chicago. And I was sitting at a meeting, and I heard somebody at the meeting say something to somebody who was a staff member, an administrator, that all 5 of us knew was not true. Absolutely not even close to truth. And the person turned to me, the staff member turned to me and said, Sister, you know about this, and that didn't happen. I said, well, I'm looking at the good of the hospital and the good of the finances and the integrity of the board. And I wasn't the board chair. And I said, well, So I went home and I told my mother, and she said, why are you so mopey? And I said, well, there was a goofy thing at the board, and I kind of equivocated. And she said, tell me. I said, well, I can't tell you because it's probably going to be legal, and it's like, I can't just tell lawyers if they're on deposition. They asked me, did you tell anybody? I said, no, I just told my mother. That doesn't count, Ma. But I did say I had this thing, and she said, you lied, didn't you? I said, no, I didn't lie. I was just trying to explain the situation, Mom. I was trying, now if it takes you 10 minutes to explain to your mother what you did, there's probably something, what was I trying to be? The good old sister that was supporting the trustees. And in fact, I didn't lie. I didn't speak the truth. But when it takes 15 minutes to explain to your best friend why you did something that you did, start to think about it and see if it was a really smart thing that you did. But that's why I would call this lecture generally, would your mother be proud of you? It's the stink test, or it's the duck test. If it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck, all right. So walk the talk. Don't expect much company on the journey. Ethical decisions is like, oh, good, I'm going to make an ethical decision. I'm out on the limb of a tree, and there I am making my ethical decision. And all these people are looking up, and you're looking down, and you say to myself, boy, they're just going to say, Sanders is an idiot, but boy, does she have moral integrity. No, they're not. They're going to be sitting there sawing the limb off the tree. Don't expect a lot of people.
Yeah.
But he claps it with one hand, So don't expect much company on the journey. And Sister Brian told me this. This is a very important part. Praise and criticism are equally powerful pitfalls. Praise can get you to do the wrong thing as much as criticism can. So pay attention for both. I just think that's a really a good thing. And speak the truth, witness to what you do, begin the moral discourse about decisions and behavior, and attempt to negotiate the terrain of the common good in the community. So cultivate the questions. where show up. This is Angela's area, and she just has this kind of approach to a moral life that I like. And it's 4 questions. Show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't be too attached to the outcome. It's kind of like, where do you put your pressure? By the way, that framework, show up, pay attention, tell the truth. It's really good when they give you, when somebody asks you a question to spontaneously do a talk, you can go back to it. But when you show up, where do you put your personal resources? You know, if you're all of the time talking to lawyers, you're going to pay attention to lawyers. Get out with the kids and the faculty. With whom and what for you do you stand? Pay attention. What grabs your attention? When you're walking the halls where your students are, when you're at a board meeting, what do you notice and what do you ignore? And who's the person at the board meeting who's a trustee who you always ignore, either because they're annoyingly quiet or annoyingly not so quiet? Because everybody's got a piece of the truth, even the annoying person. How conscious are you about leading and reflecting on your life? Whoops. Tell the truth without judgment or blame. That's the hard part. That this is the mother test. Have you avoided being intentionally deceptive? You don't have to share everything you know, but in doing that, are you agreeing to something that didn't happen if you don't say something? It's hard to know. Is equivocating self-serving? That was me in the conversation with my mother. I was a new trustee of a hospital. I was young and I thought, I want to show them how to be a trustee. And this is cool. And I was equivocating because I wanted to be one of the
boys.
That's exactly right. One of the guys, you know, in the language of the day, right? Are you aware of the slippery slope to deception and lying? If you've never, if you ever want to see a good movie on that, go see Quiz Show. It's old. It's the whole slippery slope of lying of Charles Van Doren of the 1950s. Don't be too attached to the outcome. Have you conflated the good with the expedient? What's the value? And the expedient says, I'm out of here, or we have to suppress this mess right now. And this is what we're going to do. But that may not be the same as the good. You might put down the uprising, but it may not be a good thing. Have you rationalized the ends justifying the means? Everybody says, don't do that. But there is a principle in Catholic social teaching and in Catholic ethics of principle of proportionality, I think it's called, which means, do you do more good than you do evil by what you're doing? It's a little bit like, does the ends justify the means? But that's a hard one. I mean, everybody says, no, that's Machiavelli. We won't do that. Wait till you're in the middle of a situation. And then, is it really worth doing everything possible to create success? How many times have you been, we have to do everything possible to make sure that the alumni follow, that we have to do everything possible to make sure that the donors won't do an uprising. We have to do everything possible to make sure that the faculty aren't upset. You do everything that's possible. If the only thing you have, like you really want it so much, you'll do anything to get it, that's a flag. Don't. Success is not all it's cracked up to be. What does it really mean to put something in God's hands? Sometimes that feels like you didn't do enough. Oh, I'm going to let it up and go, give it to God. Maybe that's the best thing. What's ethical decision not about? It's not a formula for distinguishing between right and wrong. It's not about me alone. It's usually a community decision, or it has an impact. It's not about only being truthful. It's about acting on your truth. And it's not only about judgments uncoupled with actions. So what is it? It's about ethos. Ethics comes from the word ethos. Who are you? Who are you? Who do you bring around with you to every single situation? when you're at school, when you're at home, when you're grocery shopping, when you're doing whatever you're doing. It's not just about who you are when you're chair of the board, principal of the school, or the head of school. It's not. It's about making choices based on who you are and living well and responsibly. And all this sounds really easy, but it's kind of hard. It's about the common good. It's about integrity and truth telling, and it's about you and your relationship to God. So to go back, to present a framework about how to think through ethical dilemmas. I hope that there are some parts there that help you just thinking, but the habits of the heart, some suggestions, approaches for cultivating a heart responsive to God's in an ethically challenging situation. So when you have an ethical decision that you have time to respond to, first of all, try and create that time. When somebody, when the faculty member comes into your office and says, we must, write a little piece of paper on your desk and say, thank you very much. I need some time to think about it. But you need to act right now, because if you don't act right now, this is going to happen. Thank you. I will act. Thank you. I need some time. Pull away. The first person who hits you is going to have enormous influence on your decision. Pull back a bit. Pull back. They're going to want a decision. And if you like the person, you're going to want to give them a decision, especially the one to make that person happy. Try not to do that. And if you're by yourself, talk to somebody else who helps you push it back. Because most things don't need to be done in that 30 seconds that person is confronting you. And that's your most vulnerable time for making a decision, and a bad decision. Why? No time to listen to God, no time to listen to anybody else, no time to take in the context, no time. What's the time? The time is right smack what's in your face, and it's going to be really, really tough. And that's when you're most vulnerable. And just because one day you woke up and you were head of school didn't mean that you're not vulnerable to these things. I woke up one day and found I was president of the community, and I thought, oh, this is great. I get to make all these decisions, until one came and it's like, okay, Sue, what are you going to do? Or what do I tell them? Put some distance between this. No, I went right down and I said to the vice president, what are we going to do? And she said, slow down, Sue, slow down. That's why you need friends, one or two, and they may not be in the same building where you are. So that's a little bit. Just one last piece. There's a way to think about God that sometimes helps, and this isn't in here, but I think it's think about who God is for you when you're in that quiet little drive going on Forest Preserve on your way back home. Is God the dictator of the terms? Does God love you? Is God the one with the divine calculus, the income and the outcome, the expenses, the good and the bad? So think about who God is for you. How is God acting in your life? Because in all these decisions, God is acting in your life. You're not there by yourself, even in that 30 seconds when the faculty member is right in your face. Because if you practice the habit of discernment, you might hear the, wait, you don't need to do this right. Wait, I don't have an answer. Wait, you'll hear it. You really will. If you push some of the stuff away, not the right answer, but the way to go. So how is God acting in my life? In the vice president who I called up and I said, we got to do something right away. No, we don't, Sue. No, we don't. Let's sit down and talk about this. You're too riled up. You're too angry. You're too tired. It's Friday and it's 6:30 and I want to go home. All good reasons to wait, Sue. Okay. Yeah, but I want a nice weekend, darn it. I want a nice weekend for myself. If I just tell her no, it'll all be over. Expedience. Okay. And then the third part. So who's got, how am I responding? Because it's really about you and God ultimately. God doesn't abandon anybody in this process, which doesn't mean you're not miserable sometimes. That's really a cheerful note to end up on, isn't it? You folks are wonderful. I love that you're involved with kids. It's so exciting.